listening to Have You Ever Wondered? It is June 29th, 2022. It's also Wednesday, I believe. I'm Chloe, and the title of today's episode is Where's Everybody Gonna Live? We're in a global housing crisis, you guys. There are just under 8 billion people in the world right now, with that number constantly going up. Let's take a small cross-section of those people. Say your major Anglophonic countries. You know, the ones most people think about when you think about people who primarily speak English. The US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. According to World Population Review, right now, give or take, the US is at about 35 million people. The UK plus Ireland is around 70 million. Canada, around 38 million. Australia, approximately 26 million. And New Zealand is just under 5 million. That's a total of around 474 million people. Let's get bigger. China, around 1.4 billion. India, around 1.4 billion. They're kind of neck and neck. China has more for now, but India's population is growing faster. So do with that what you will. Where are all these people living? And I'm not even scratching the surface of the global population by just mentioning those countries. Well, I guess I'm scratching the surface, but we're not digging deep. The net population of this planet goes up by one person every 0.4 seconds. I'm serious. Where is everybody gonna live? Now, countries in the developed world are known for having cities that are remarkably difficult in which to afford housing. We're talking Hong Kong, Sydney, New York, Paris, London, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Vancouver. But even their less famed cousins, Detroit, Denver, Singapore, Philadelphia, Osaka, Manchester, Brisbane, Orlando, Montreal are also becoming quite challenging to afford in their own right. In all of these places, depending on income, people can be paying 20, 30, even 50% or more of what they make just for the privilege of living indoors. Yep, I said privilege, because that's how we treat housing nowadays. Real estate is increasingly looked at as an investment, a vehicle. Put your extra cash if you have some. A wise purchase that will appreciate for you over the years. And all that might be true. But at its most basic, the need for shelter is the need for health and safety, for privacy and community. Now, if you think the percentages in the developed world are challenging, take a look at the developing world. Now, according to a Bloomberg article from a few years back that I'll link in the description, about 850 million people in the developing world, and this was as of, like I said, about 4 years ago, so the number is higher now, no doubt. 850 million, so almost double the total number of people who live in Anglophonic countries, live in what they politely refer to as informal settlements. Here in the U.S., we frequently refer to a similar idea as a homeless encampment. But essentially what they are is communities of people who cobble together places to live using ramshackle building techniques at best, and frequently without basic utilities like electricity and running water. Now, part of the reason for this is that because in cities dotted all around the developing world like Hanoi, Mumbai, Rio, Caracas, the cost of housing in relation to the level of income for the people who live in those areas, oh, it hurts my head, can go 200%, 300%, or even into the thousands when you compare the two. So for example, if I'm living in one of these places and my income is $100 a month, I'm literally just making up that number. From a percentage standpoint, the rent would be $300 a month. That would be your 300%. And what does that do to my capacity to find some place to live? So, as in many global issues, we have a twofold problem. One for the developing world and one for the developed world. But on the edges of society in both of those groups, and actually increasingly toward the middle as well, there are people who cannot afford to live where they live. And that's a big problem for everyone, because housing should be a right, not a privilege. Shelter is a necessity, not just an investment. Being able to afford to live inside is not a character-defining virtue. It is crucial for the health and welfare of human beings. So originally today, I just wanted to have a simple little chat about tiny houses because I love tiny houses so much. Do you want to lose an afternoon of your life? Google tiny houses, or better yet, type it into YouTube. Or do a search for #vanlife on Instagram. The number of people who are taking tiny spaces and turning them into beautiful homes has been going up steadily for years. But tiny living could be more than just a cute little phenomenon. And when I started looking at ways I could address the idea of tiny living, you can't think about any type of living without also considering this housing crisis. And so, city planners, architects, engineers, home builders, advocates for the unhoused are all starting to look at tiny homes as a potential solution to this issue. Tiny houses are interesting to design and affordable to build. They're also beneficial for our current environmental crisis because they require fewer building materials, they take up less land space, and they can be operated with relatively low amounts of energy. Yay, yay. So all of those factors combine, the durability factor, the financial, and the environmental have had tiny homes on my radar for quite a while. And like, let's be super pragmatic and honest, because I'm not perfect. Obviously, I've never really been an MVP on the old domestic tip. And so the more house there is there, the more house there is sitting there waiting in vain for me to clean it. So for someone like me, the solution is plain as day. Find a way to live in some type of tiny house. That's what I've been doing, and that's what I continue to plan to do. But are these tiny houses for everyone? I think a much larger portion of the population would be happier than they realize, living in less space than they currently do. But I also think the onus of responsibility to help solve this crisis has to be shifted back to local governments and enterprise. So whether you're talking about tiny houses or apartment buildings or single family homes or whatever, there's not enough housing options being built for non-rich people. And while some cities, states, countries have tried to implement regulations to keep rental prices affordable in their areas, no one really seems to have found long-lasting success. And that means there's always a shortage of affordable housing for non-rich people. Now, even the most cursory knowledge of supply and demand lets you know that the less of something there is, the more likely its cost is going to be to rise, which means that even the affordable housing that we have available now is becoming less and less affordable. And that's just when we talk about renting. There are so many levels of privilege when it comes to housing. You've got your mega rich who can buy whatever they want. They can own multiple houses. It doesn't even touch them to pick up whatever property they want. There are those who are affluent and can comfortably afford one luxury home, apartment, condo. There are those who work hard and own their home. They are part of the global middle class and they own their home. They are paying it off. They are working and trying to make it work. There are those for whom home ownership is not yet in reach, but one day it will be. So maybe they're planning or saving, but it's still a goal. And then there are those, and this group is growing, who are renting now and will be renting forever. And then there are people for whom even renting, vacillates back and forth between being affordable and not affordable, meaning sometimes they have the ability to provide themselves with a place to live, and sometimes they don't. And then there are those for whom living someplace safe and indoors is completely out of reach. There's a line you could draw between people who can afford home ownership and people who cannot. And the thing that's making people even more displeased with the current housing landscape is that more and more people who previously, over time, at some point in their lives, would have made it above that line and at some point owned something, but they now feel as though they never will. If you asked each of the almost 8 billion people who currently live on this planet exactly what the aesthetic attributes of their dream home might be, you could probably get 8 billion different answers. But what every human needs is a safe and affordable place to live. And we are not meeting those needs as a society for a giant swath of the global population. Now, we're going to have to consider this the first part of a multi-part series on housing, to be honest, guys. I did hours of research on this and thinking and reading and watching things, and I was up last night and then I was up again this morning, and I could make this show 3 hours long and we still would not begin to even adequately describe this issue. I mean, I'm just hitting points, let alone come up with viable solutions. But humans are innovative. Talking through things and thinking through things is the way to come up with solutions for things. So don't lose heart. And in the meantime, if you have someplace safe and affordable where you live right now, be thankful. Oh man, short poem. I picked a short poem because I knew I was going to go off on this housing thing. I don't want to keep you here forever. This poem is by Izumi Shikibu. And it's short, but it's beautiful. It's a metaphorical house, but I think it still suits surrounding this topic. Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof planks of this ruined house. I really only glance at the ratings of this show occasionally because I am genuinely grateful for each and every listener and viewer, regardless of the number. But from what I can tell, I believe most of this audience currently resides in the developed world. And so as a result, you may have access to some discretionary income or some discretionary time, or both. Housing is a local issue, and so since I don't know exactly where you are, I can't really recommend nonprofit organizations that could ameliorate the housing situation in your community. But you could take a look. Although I really like broad organizations like Habitat for Humanity, and I will put their link in the description as well, because they build new houses, they repair existing houses, they recycle building materials, they sell building materials at affordable prices for people who are trying to build and repair houses, and all of those things are extremely helpful when you're talking about affordable housing. You can also do things that don't require any money at all. I used to volunteer at a halfway house when I lived in South Carolina, and it was this really beautiful home for women who were transitioning away from being incarcerated and toward reintegrating into society. And that place was filled with light and energy and laughter and good food, and going there to spend time with those women was always a joy. The people who operated it, as well as the people who lived there, were so appreciative every time we visited with them, because just that little hour or two that we spent was making it that much easier for those women to feel like they could belong again. There was a place for them. So try not to be discouraged so much by the situation that you can't see clear to a way that you could help provide a solution, and even a small one. For my part, in addition to other things that I do, I'm going to keep doing research for part 2, which will be coming as soon as it's ready. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.